Hey everybody, we're back with Deep Images, and we have even more samurai films to cover. Um, with me is CF Roberts, my amazing co-host, and my other amazing co-host, Justin Cotton, and the incredible Bill Mulligan. And I just want to say that our incredible co-host, Justin Cotton, has quite a doozy of a samurai movie. It's yeah, an indulgence.
Okay, well, it's another one from directed by Akira Kurosawa. It's called Rashomon. I really enjoyed and loved actually Seven Samurai, which I only saw for the first time a few months ago. This one's quite a bit shorter at 95, roughly 95 minutes. It's 1950 and it's black and white, which I think really suits the ambiance of the time. And really works in well with the Japanese natural world cinematography of the forest where it's mainly set.
Hmm,
It's set in the Heian era, which is roughly from the 8th to 12th century, which I looked up on Wiki.
hmm.
It starts with a priest, a woodcutter, and a peasant who are under the Rashomon city gate, and they discuss the strange happenings that they can't work out, where there was a recent murder of a samurai in the forest and an attack on his wife. Um, and the first of all, the woodcutter talks about how he discovered the wife's hat, her shoe, an amulet in the forest, and then he found a dead body with the hands up, which was the samurai who'd been murdered. Um, so it was an attack on the samurai and his wife as they travelled through the forest. Um, and then the scene basically moves to a captured bandit who is by the name of Tajumaru, uh, and he is actually played by one of the main characters from Seven Samurai, who was the comedic crazy samurai who's killed near the end.
Oh, sure, I'll
He
meet you
plays
now.
the he plays the bandit in this film,
Yeah.
and he's tied up and he's before a trial, and he then tells his story of what's actually happened and what his involvement was in this murder and this attack. And Yeah, so what it really involves, this movie, is a bit of a morality tale, but it's three different stories from people involved in this attack, and each of the stories is given from the perspective of that particular person telling the story, which tends to cast them in the best possible light, of course.
Right.
Um, During this trial, Tajimaro is all tied up, and he'd been captured after these events took place because he'd been shot with arrows and was captured by some other third party and taken to this trial. And his story was that he came across the samurai and his wife who passed him in the forest. Um, he then decided he was so attracted to the wife that he tricked the husband, who's the samurai, and fought him and subdued him, and then went to find the wife, seduces the wife, and when he takes the wife back, she sees that her husband, the samurai, has been tied up and he's basically helpless, sitting near a tree. Um, so, as I say, the bandit Tajimuro seduces the wife, but the wife says, "Well, now that I've been intimate with two men, I feel shame and dishonor. So only one of you must survive. So I believe that you two, the samurai and the bandit, should fight, and uh, and whoever survives, I'll be with them." So there is then another duel between uh, the samurai and the bandit, who is the samurai is released for this purpose. And Tajimaro eventually, after quite a long sword fight, ends up killing the samurai. But the wife, in the meantime, has fled, which seems to be a common occurrence that the wife flees at the end of these scenes. So they're like three little stories with different storylines, because then the movie then shifts to the wife, who has survived, and she's talking at the trial, and her version of the events is different. She says that after she was intimate with and you don't see necessarily sex or anything like that, but after she was intimate and seduced by the bandit, she looked at her husband, and he refused to speak to her and just looked at her with complete scorn, because he had been tied up and was unable to stop what was going on. But he looked at his wife with scorn, as though she was a shamed woman. So she becomes hysterical, and you see her advancing towards the samurai, who's still tied up, unable to move. Um, and she's got this dagger in her hand. But then she says, "Oh, you don't see anything more." And she then says at the trial that she must have fainted. She doesn't know quite what happened, but when she woke up, her husband, the samurai, had a dagger in his heart and was dead. So she tries to commit suicide, and I think it was in a lake or pond, but survives. But she can't remember what's happened or how her husband was killed because she'd fainted. There's then a bit of a discussion, but the scene then moves back to the Rashomon Gate in the present time, which always seems to be a very rainy scene with lots of rain bucketing down. And we've got the woodcutter talking to the peasant. And by this stage, woodcutter talking to the priest, rather. And by this stage, they've been joined by a third party peasant or commoner. And they all discuss how women can't really be trusted, particularly when they turn on the waterworks and cry. They're too emotional and not to be trusted. And none of them really believes the wife's tale. The third tale is then from the actual from the samurai who was killed, and the way he communicates is through a medium, through the agency of the wife.
That's
So
when
it's
the
a bit
movie
like
just goes somewhere else. You know, it's
it
like
becomes paranormal and
just
supernatural.
let the
A
victim
little bit,
talk, even though he's dead.
yeah. So that's right. They even say this. One of the peasant says, "Well, how can we hear from a character who's died? How can we hear from a samurai who's already been dead? The dead tell no tales." But they then speak through a spirit medium at the trial they did, and through the wife's voice, the samurai says what actually happened. And he says that his wife was seduced by the bandit, and she eventually agreed to marry him, but demanded as the price of that she kill the samurai, because again the shame or the shame agency comes into being, and because of her honor, she cannot marry the samurai unless he then kills the bandit. So Tajamaru, the bandit, so totally disgusted by this, and the samurai is completely shocked as well, that he offers to kill the wife for the samurai. He basically says to the samurai, "What would you like me to do? Would you like me to free you? Shall I let her flee, or should I kill her now?" Sort of thing. And anyway, he does release the samurai. The wife has fled in the meantime. But because of the shame and dishonor of his wife saying this, the samurai actually kills himself and plunges the dagger into his own heart. So that was the tale from the dead samurai spoken through the medium. And then finally it moves on. It goes back to the Rashomon Gate scene with the rain bucketing down. And the woodcutter finally admits that his first story was not actually that accurate, where he just simply found artifacts in the dead body. He'd actually seen more than this. And he says, "I can say that none of these three accounts are true because I saw actually what did happen." And he says the samurai was killed by a sword rather than a dagger. Tojamaru, the bandit, had begged the wife to marry him, but also moved that onward to saying, "If you don't marry me, I'll kill you." So it was a begging of the wife to marry the bandit, but under the pain of being killed if she didn't agree. The wife instead runs off and frees her husband, but the samurai is so upset or shamed by his wife being seduced by the bandit that he refuses to fight the bandit. The wife then basically goads the two men into fighting each other again, because she says, "Well, I think both of you are lesser men. You haven't done the right thing by me, and therefore a true man would fight for me." So the samurai and the bandit then do end up in a duel, and eventually, as before, the samurai is killed by the bandit Tojamaru. But in the meantime, the wife has fled once more. So each of these three stories are told from the point of view of someone different. The first three stories were told from a biased point of view to paint the storyteller in the best possible light. And then the fourth account is from the woodcutter, who again is played by an actor from Seven Samurai, which is, I think he was one of the main characters in Seven Samurai, the lead samurai. So he plays the woodcutter in this film.
And the guy he's talking to is another regular actor. And in the year after this movie was made, uh,
Yes.
Kurosawa did The Idiot, which I reviewed on this channel, which did have Takashi Shimura and that other actor in prominent role. And the character who played the samurai played the Idiot, Michigan like character. So, and Mifune's in it too. So yeah, but go ahead.
Yeah. So they say, well, why did you? I think it was the peasant then says to the woodcutter, well, why did you not tell the truth in the first place? And the woodcutter says, well, I was worried that I was going to get in trouble for what I knew, but this is a true story of what actually happened. And you understand that the story, the version most to be trusted is that of the woodcutter, because he's a bystander. He was not invested in or part of the actual events himself. He was simply a bystander.
Mm-hmm.
And he's kind of like the moral center of the film, I suppose, because we're now reaching the end of the film, and there's the sound of a crying baby, and the peasant, who's a bit of a nefarious character, wants to take the baby for financial reasons, but the woodcutter stops him, as does the priest, and the woodcutter offers to take care of the child. He's already got 6 children of his own, but he will take care of this baby as though it was his own. It wasn't really explained to me where the baby came from, whether it was the wife's baby, perhaps. I'm not sure, but this baby was located near the Rashomon gate. So the woodcutter then basically leaves the scene saying he'll look after the baby, and that's when the film ends. But before that, the priest tells the woodcutter that after hearing these stories, I've lost some faith in humanity.
Mm-hmm.
But after seeing your selfless act of taking on the baby and saying you will take care of the child, you restored some of my faith in humanity. So I think key themes of the film are obviously shame and honor. The wife demanding that these 2 men fight each other because of her shame of being intimate with 2 different men. The honor code with the samurai, who is so appalled by his wife being intimate with the bandit while he was tied up, is also comes through quite strongly in the film. And it's a bit of a morality tale, I suppose, involving different parties traveling, which I think is a bit like what you find in Chaucer literature, where you have morality fables from the point of view of 2 or 3 different characters from different walks of life. So that's kind of what it reminded me of. And just like with Seven Samurai, I really enjoyed the natural world cinematography and the rain and that kind of thing. And the fact it was black and white, I thought worked quite well with the music score as well, from the sort of it's a very early 1950s type music score.
Yeah, it sounds more like an American,
which creates like an epic feel to the whole thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I pretty much enjoyed it. I thought it was good. It wasn't as enjoyable for me as Seven Samurai, but it was economic. It was only 95 minutes, 100 minutes long, or something like that. And so I'd recommend it as a good watch. I don't know if any of you, I know Henry's seen it. I don't know if you other 2 guys have seen it and what your thoughts were on it. Apparently it got mixed reviews when it was first released in really? Japan, but I saw this on Wikipedia.
But it was a big hit worldwide.
But the Japanese apparently are very tough on their own films when they critique their own films, and that's what they said. So
it exported
better. It wasn't surprising that when it was first released, it was spoken of more favorably in the West than it was in Japan at the time. I dare say now it might have become a bit of a classic in Japan anyway.
It's a classic everywhere. Yeah. It won I'm pretty sure it won the Academy Award for a foreign film ever.
Now, I think Rashomon is one of those movies that has its reputation kind of carries itself. I think many years before I ever saw Rashomon, you learn eventually that you've seen it a million times, because it's been said that every sitcom ever made does a version of Rashomon.
Yeah, it's the structure.
And, that's true. And I think my brother first brought it up to me and told me about this movie called Rashomon that I never saw till many years later. And just very much just a structure that a lot of people have carried. It's a very popular story. I developed I don't know, I developed a theory. Me and a couple of friends developed a theory over many years living here in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where I live, and that's that. I don't know. We've always talked about the Rashomon effect in Fayetteville, where you'll never get the straight story on anything from anyone.
Right, right.
Yeah, no, you're right. What you just said is so true. Any situation comedy that runs for more than 3 seasons will inevitably have a Rashomon episode and
Yeah.
a Christmas Carol episode,
Yeah.
and probably a Wizard of Oz tossed in there too. These are go-to themes. And people who have never seen Rashomon may not even know it's a movie, probably see the word crop up in reviews because
Yeah.
it really is super influential. It's hard to imagine. Well, probably now. Back in the day, if you took a film class, history of film or great film, Rashomon was one of the go-to films that they would show because, yeah, story structure, very influential, and a great film. Kurosawa, it'd be a lot easier just to list his not great films.
Yeah.
Because there
You
aren't any.
know,
there aren't many.
I don't know. Maybe Tora, but I don't know if any of his stuff even made it to the very end.
Nah, maybe
Yeah. So
more of Fakosku's did of the
I don't
Japanese.
know what they were thinking with that one, but
No, Well, I love it.
Tora, that was his.
well, he was
helped
supposed to
work on
direct
it.
the Japanese part,
Yeah,
and then they had whoever did the American part, and of course he went in this thinking he's making a Kurosawa film, and they're like, okay, this isn't moving fast enough, so he got removed and attempted suicide. So we almost,
Man.
wow, I forgot
lost
that.
one of our greatest artists over
Kenji Fukasku directed the Japanese parts that are in there.
Yes, and he's a great director, but
He is a great
he went
director.
in there knowing what he was working on. This is just a
Right.
Hollywood production. This was not
Right.
great art. Don't save that for Battle Royale,
Right.
one of my favorites.
Yeah. Well, that's a great one. All right, so we're in Congress about another Kurosawa movie, the exact same lineup as our symposium on Seven Samurai, I think. No, it was Keith instead of Bill, but 3/4 in spirit were the same. So anyway,
Maybe you can get Nick to come along and talk some Kurosawa as well.
I don't know. I mean, his communication style, you might start to think he's telling the story in Japanese. I mean,
Nick
you don't know.
yeah.
You might need a translator.
Yeah.
All right.
It actually took me a while to
Goodness
work out.
gracious.
I eventually managed to work out how to get put the subtitles on this laptop. It only took me about 5 minutes, but I found that it was quite hard to hear because I went for the dubbing at first. The dubbing was fine, but it was a little bit hard to hear, so I ended up putting the subtitles on as well, which
I don't
did
like the
make
dubbed
it
version.
easier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Japanese is
I
better.
could have just had Japanese and subtitles only, I suppose.
Yeah. I put
But
subtitles and everything.
I'm keen to watch more Kurosawa now because there's 2 good films. So
Well, you
yeah.
might have an opportunity next week. We'll talk about it. So
there's one called Throne of Blood, which was on at the Astor recently.
it's
but I
great.
missed it.
yeah, we have
it's
covered Throne of
fantastic.
Blood. Keith
We
covered
covered it already.
Japanese cinema.
Keith, yeah.
It's a great movie, though. Yeah, absolutely.
Do a double feature of Throne of Blood and Ron, so you'll get to see 2 Kurosawa adaptations of Shakespeare. Can't go wrong.
Yeah, Bill covered Ron for the most part on our Women Warriors. Hidden Fortress, one of our guys who was suggested this topic, actually, who is not with us tonight, was wanting to do Hidden Fortress, but we might toss a coin in the air and let it land on Justin's head for that one. We'll see. All right, so now we're going to go to Bill again. Yes.
Okay.
All right,
This one won't take very long. Okay, well, this is one I wasn't really aware of, although it's very well regarded, and I think it was even nominated for Academy Award for Best Foreign Film, and it's The Twilight Samurai. And the film that I first spoke about in our last episode or a couple episodes ago was Harakiri, which was a real deconstructive hate down of samurai and bushido and just the whole thing. This is also not a very favorable, doesn't leave you with a very favorable impression of the bureaucracy that the samurai were part of and supporting. But this has one of the most likable characters in all samurai film. I mean, in terms of honor and decency,
Hmm.
they're all honorable, at least in their own minds, some more than others. But a lot of times the code allows them to get away with some cruelty, meanness, atrocities. All, but it's justified because, well, this is the way it has to be. Certainly, Harakiri took that to its ultimate. Twilight Samurai. This is from 2002, so very recent,
Mm-hmm.
and written and directed by Yoji Yamada. And this would be a later film, so this is mid 1800s, 1900s, 19th century. Sorry,
That's
let's
okay.
say 1850 and call it even. Um, things are starting to fall apart, and the samurai are not the samurai of our classic cinema, running around and flashing swords. It does happen, but for the most part, you can be a samurai and just be a bureaucrat, and that is the hero that we're following here. Let me see if I can pronounce it. Iguchi Sibai or Sibai. I don't know. I don't know. I'm terrible with this. I can barely pronounce English. He's a samurai, but you wouldn't know it because he is just he works in a warehouse. He keeps inventory. He's a clerk
Mm-hmm.
who has a sword and dresses like a samurai, but not very well because this guy is not. He hasn't had a lucky life. His wife dies of tuberculosis. He somehow manages to have a funeral for her that's much better than anyone would expect because he's just barely getting by. He has his mom, but she is suffering from dementia. He has two daughters. He doesn't have time to bathe as often as he probably should. His hair is unkempt. His nickname is Twilight because his friends, who are not the greatest folks in the world, his fellow samurai, when the day is done and it's time to go celebrate with some sake and geisha girls, he's got to run home to his family, take care of them. The family's more important. So, he isn't rising very high in the bureaucracy there. He doesn't get to bond with the others. And there you go. So, taking care of his family takes priority. Now, of course, for our modern sensibilities, this guy is by far the best character, at least in the beginning, that we see here and all. But for the time, he's low ranking and getting lower. And then things take a change when an old friend of his shows up, and it's his childhood girlfriend. Well, I mean, I don't think they were ever girlfriend, boyfriend, but he's always had a crush on her, obviously.
Mm.
Grown up now. This is the sister of one of the nicer samurai that fellow samurai. She's a little bit of a modern woman. All right. She's separated from her abusive husband. He doesn't really buy into a lot of the requirements that women are expected to adhere to of the time. And we're starting to get a nice little relationship going there. But part of the problem is that he is of such low status. His late wife already obviously married down, and that was a problem and something he still thinks about. Turns out he hawked his swords to afford the funeral. And selling your swords for samurai was a great disgrace. They were an extension of your soul.
Yeah.
So anytime they have a samurai who's substituted wooden swords for the metal ones, that's a problem. Even though this guy is not really expected to go out there and fight, those days are kind of gone, but not entirely gone because her abusive ex-husband shows up drunkenly and is being a problem, challenges his friend to a fight. Our hero takes his place, manages to conk him on the head with his wooden sword, knock him out, which is good because according to the rules, they both be put to death. It's all very complicated. His friend actually asks him to marry his sister, which would make everyone happy, but it's the middle of the movie, so we know that's not going to happen. And he refuses that because again, he's really hung up on the class system. So once again, this system is making everybody miserable.
Mhm.
It's doing no one any good
They often
whatsoever.
do.
But word gets out that he knocked this guy out, and they come to him and ask him to actually kill this drunk, who apparently has got in the middle of some politics and picked the wrong side, and they want him to kill himself. And although this guy's not a very likable character, I'm with him on this. He's like, no, I'm not going to do that. So they send a guy out after him, and he kills him. He kills the guy they sent out there, so they have a problem now. And so they want this guy to go do it, and he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to kill this guy or anything, and uh, it's a mess. But they finally they meet with him. Oh, so the girl, the woman who he loves, obviously everyone loves her. She's great. She comes over and takes care of him, gives him the haircut and his clothes and all the things that you need to do, because even something as simple as just assassinating someone has to be like a ritual. You got to do all these things to go with the code. And then we finally get to a fight between the two of them, and it's good. Now, this is not one of those movies that's action packed, and the fighting is actually kind of realistic. It doesn't have that glamour, and this guy's not what I would consider an action director. This doesn't have a great set pieces and choreography and composition that is what I really love about samurai films. What it does have, and very few samurai films have this, are really likable protagonists that you super care about, and you're just like, oh, you're just born in the wrong time and stuck with this. There is a pretty good battle between the two of them. The bad guy has his katana, and our hero, all he has is really a small sword, but it's clever how he uses that to his advantage. This guy's smart. He's down on his luck guy, but he is skilled. He's very honorable, very family oriented, and he's also smart. How do you battle someone who has a much bigger sword than you do? And one of the tricks is do it indoors. That big sword is not locking into things, hitting the ceiling, and it kind of gets in the way. You might actually be able to pull it off with something simpler. And we end. Oh man, this movie killed me at the end. Um, they throw us a bone. They throw us a bone that there is happiness, but all true stories end in death, and happiness, it's the tragedy of life that nothing lasts. And so they couldn't give us a happy ending where these two people who are right for each other and care for each other, you know, get married and live happily ever after, because that just never happens. So they give a little epilogue that let us know just how short-lived their happiness, though genuine, was. And although that's sad, that's also realistic, because you can only, you only get so much, no matter what your situation is. It only lasts as long as it lasts.
Yeah.
And that hits home, but it works, and it's right for this film, because this film, is telling what seems, more often than most in this, it seems like a story that could actually happen.
Mm.
And it's a genuinely uplifting thing that it's being narrated by one of the daughters, now an older woman herself, um, talking about how her father was, considered by most people to be very unlucky and kind of a sad, pathetic figure, but that he didn't feel that way, and his family didn't feel that way. That really, if you look at the grand scheme of things, his was a life worth celebrating and one worth aspiring to,
Mm.
more so than probably the ones that will have books written about them. Well, that's a message you don't often get in these films,
That's
Mm.
true.
and it's one worth having.
Yeah.
So this one, I don't know. I hadn't heard of it for a film that was so well regarded and got nominated and everything. I I don't know. I think of it, if you see the trailer and everything, you realize pretty quickly this just is not what we think of when we think of samurai films.
Yeah.
So I think maybe people are like, well, this seems really talky. And it is. It is. But they're good characters, really well done, likable, sympathetic characters. And that's worth seeing. So
Very good.
definitely recommend it. It's not going to be one of my favorite samurai films because fundamentally I'm a shallow person who likes to see men with swords whacking each other, geysers of blood. If it's a Kenji Masuni movie,
Yeah.
I like that. But every now and then, as a palate cleanser, it's really nice to have just a good, decent film about good, decent people. So
Yeah, it
that's
seems
that's my
very.
review for Twilight Samurai. Has anyone else seen this?
I did see it. It's been a long time, and I don't remember a lot about. Like I got when it was first on some streaming channel. I remember when it came out on DVD. That was the first I heard about it because I was working at Borders, and it sounded kind of different. When I saw it's true. It wasn't what I was expecting. Uh, I can't remember if I liked it or not. I just my brain didn't grab onto it. So that means I probably should watch it again and look for those nuances you're describing.
And if you are a guy who likes spurting blood and the lopped off heads and everything, and your significant other is totally not into that. Now I lucked out on that front because she totally is. But
It's good to have
for
range.
many of us, that's not the case. Well, here's one where she's like, oh, no, no, no. I think a lot of women will like this film. It is romantic in a realistic way. I've always been kind of a sucker for romantic movies where the couple is right for each other, the times are not, or there's something holding them back. Doomed love and forbidden love is just chef's kiss, the best kind of love, because
We're getting ready to
it's
cover some of those soon, remember?
yeah, okay. So they're that's great. I mean, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, you're just like, oh my God, will these
Yeah,
two
we covered
finally
that one.
kiss each other for the love
Yeah,
of God? What
that's
is the problem here?
that's
And
what
it's like,
a lot of Wong Kar-wai's movies are, and for Mood for Love especially. But when we were doing that alternate science fiction series, the one time you did Angel's Egg, and then I followed it with 2046, and in that movie there's a scene where Tony Leung is having his interior monologue, and he's like, "Love is all a matter of timing." If
yeah,
I'd been born in a different place or a different time, my story may have had a very different ending. And
absolutely.
I cry every time I see that movie. It's my favorite movie.
That's because also if you grew up reading Marvel comics as a kid,
Yeah.
that's romance. It's basically Cyclops and Jean Grey, Marvel
Right.
Girl, and all you see because we get to read their thought balloons. That was the best
Right.
part about romance and Marvel comics. And Cyclops is always like, if only I could tell Jean that I love her, but no, that would make me happy. And
Yeah.
it's oh,
It's Matt,
oh
Matt, Matt and Karen.
yeah,
It's,
and we're looking at this as like, cute. What's wrong with you two? And we're like, well, Bill, they can't read each other's thought balloons. They don't know.
yeah, I grew up on
Yeah.
soap operas and Marvel comics, so I guess my brain is like my own stories have tons of romance, but some of it's
And of course, story
thrown
is
in.
not interesting if a couple meets and they immediately are attracted to each other. So they start going out and blah blah blah. Everything's happy. It's like,
The way to keep
and
them interesting, I think, in a long form storytelling is when they partner up on something, whatever it is, whether they're going to business together or in the comics, whatever, they're fighting together on the same team, or they're doing something together as a unit where one complements the other, kind of like the Thin Man or something, where you have a couple who's doing the stuff.
that's yeah. The Thin Man's one of my favorites. That's great. But more typical and more I guess better story wise is more like Casablanca, where
Right.
clearly these two were meant for each other, but she's married, World War II, there's Nazis. I mean, just everything is just conspiring to keep it from happening. And so there's the trick. How do you tell the story and either have a happy ending, which totally would not work for Casablanca, or have the nerve to come up with some reason why these two cannot get together, and yet that's the ending that we need. Might not be the ending we want, but it is the ending we want.
You guys seen this movie, Twilight Samurai?
I've heard of
No.
it.
Okay.
Seems
Yeah,
among samurai movie fans, it seems to be very popular. It seems to make a lot of top 10 lists.
Yeah, I
It
agree.
strike because it
yeah,
strikes a nice balance of criticizing the structure, the whole idea, the Bushido idea and everything, which now we're kind of used to because it seems like most samurai films do that. But at the same time, giving us a samurai we can root for and we can admire. That even though so much of the society that it was built around is kind of encouraging you to become a jerk at best and murderous rapist jerk at worst, it is
mm,
possible for someone to maintain their honor and do things that we can all relate to, which is, take care of your family. That
Mhm.
is more important than your lord, the
Right,
shogunate, or whatever
of
these
course.
people. Yeah. I think anyone who works for a corporation, because you got to make money, you got to keep food on the table, can relate to that
Yeah.
really family's more important. And it's nice to see a character who totally embodies that.
That's very
Yeah.
cool.
So I enjoyed it. I'm glad. And it was
Well,
only because of this podcast, and I was searching around for one I hadn't done or hadn't seen. That I was like, oh, well, let's take a look.
yeah, I was glad when you mentioned it because I thought that was a cool unexpected choice, which I always like. Um, so we're gonna go ahead and wrap up for this one, and we'll have more samurais coming at you soon. Hopefully it won't hurt you. And before we wrap up, one of our wonderful people here wants to impart a message to you, which I wholeheartedly support.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about that. Folks, you watching this video? Why don't you hit that little thumbs up button? Give us a like. And while you're at it, you might subscribe. It helps us with the algorithm. Keep an eye out. There's a little bell icon. You ring that, and that way you get notifications whenever we put out a new video, and we put out a lot of them.
Mm.
Um, in fact, if you're here, we're talking about films. You know what? You may not agree with everything we say. You may have some serious counterpoints you want to bring about. You know what? Go down to that comment section. Let us know what you're thinking. Come on, fight us.
Yeah, let's get a dialogue going.
Yeah, we'll kick your ass. No, maybe
No,
not.
no, no, they'll probably kick our ass.
Hey,
mm.
You guys
we're
have
lovers. We're not fighters.
we're love, absolutely. You guys have a wonderful evening, and thanks for watching. Take care.
Thank you.
And it's true that we cannot see that far behind. If we looked all the way in the past, we'd go blind. In the night, from the stars as they've all lived their lives, and the light that they gave as they burned and then died.